So it still seems as though Manchester United are interested in bringing Ugarte into the club this summer. And to be honest, I've never really seen the fan base as divided over a potential new signing. Some think he is the man to solve a lot of our problems in midfield. Others think that he is a player that we should avoid at all costs. Truthfully, as usual, the truth probably lies somewhere in between, especially out of possession. Now, statistically, from a defensive point of view, Ugarte looks like a truly elite player, particularly at a quick glance. If we are talking about his rank in the French League last season, he really was statistically one of the best ball-winning midfielders. He attempted a lot of tackles, he won possession for his side on a regular basis. His FBref report, again, at a glance, also looks pretty strong. For tackles in the defensive third, the middle third, and the attacking third, and of course, therefore, tackles in general, look really good. He is attempting a lot of tackles all over the pitch. Now, the reason his stats look so good is because he is an absolute terrier off the ball. Out of possession, he works incredibly hard, and he has that sort of typical South American tenacity to the way that he defends. And in small spaces, small duels, he can be pretty dominant. He goes into the tackle with a lot of aggression, but also with a lot of strength a lot of the time. And a lot of the time, he is able to come out of the other side with the ball. From a tactical point of view, that could make him ideal for Manchester United. For example, with our high pressing structure. We know that United will often be situated in a sort of 4-2-4 high block shape, and then when we see the trigger, we see the team go more aggressive, and it can, although it doesn't always, turn into a man-to-man pressing structure. Ugarte could improve Manchester United in this sense. Someone like Casemiro, despite starting the season well, does struggle with the mobility and, getting about the pitch and covering a lot of ground. Ugarte doesn't have that issue. Again, he's mobile and tenacious in his pressing ability. So he is almost on paper perfectly suited to this role. This also comes into counter-pressing as well. So let's say United have the ball, we are attacking down the right-hand side, and then we lose possession. Counter-pressing is our response to that situation. How quickly can we get players around the ball? Can we go win the ball back really quickly? If you can, it gives you potential to overturn the ball and attack the opposition when they are vulnerable, or actually just recycle the ball and keep the ball ticking over. But either way, you are increasing your attacking play by being good defensively. And again, Ugarte is really strong here. As a counter-presser, he reads the game well, he steps forward, and again is aggressive and tenacious in that battle. This willingness to kind of get about the pitch and get stuck in would also help Manchester United in defensive transitions, because once again, Ugarte is willing to cover the ground, he is a mobile player, and then once in the situations, he wants to put the tackle in. So that could make him perfect for breaking up opposition counterattacks. We saw at times last season, it was a little bit too easy to move through our midfield. Ugarte is the sort of player who could potentially put a stop to that, because he is robust, he is mobile so he can cover the ground in the first place, but once in the tackle, again he is robust. And if we kind of compare that to a role that Casemiro played really well against Fulham, you can see why Ugarte kind of makes sense, because Casemiro's job out of possession was about trying to get about the pitch, put tackles in, slide tackles, standing tackles, but being strong and combative in the duel. We can see that deep here. Casemiro wins the ball back on the edge of his own penalty area. But then in another situation, he's really high, connecting the press, helping Manchester United go nearly man-to-man. And on this occasion, he is able to win the ball back nice and high with the interception, and then play the forward pass. Could Ugarte do this job? Absolutely. Another situation for Casemiro in this Fulham game, covering a little bit deeper. Again, covering a fairly small space, I would say here, looking to get across and stop the cross before it even gets into the box, blocking the threat at source. But then there's another situation like this where the pitch is a bit more open. This looks a bit more like a defensive transition. But again, Casemiro's job was to get across. He's not looking to delay the move, he's looking to be aggressive, go towards the player, and put an end to things, again, before they ever really get started. And Casemiro done that really well in this game. He just went about the pitch, put out fires basically everywhere. Lots of different situations where he's getting back, putting a strong tackle in to help his side. This is where a move for Ugarte makes a lot of sense, because Ugarte is quite similar to Casemiro with his out of possession approach, in the sense that he is a player which wants to compete in a lot of duels. Now, I'm not going to call him a destroyer of a midfielder, because he isn't quite that due to his technique, but he is a player who is involved in a lot of battles, and that is immediately a plus for this Manchester United side, because that is what we need in midfield. Someone who wants to be involved in the battles in the heart of the pitch. So in that sense, Ugarte is a lot like Casemiro with his approach, except he is more mobile. He is able to cover more ground and also has better stamina, so can do it past the 60th, the 70th minute. So initially, Ugarte looks like a really good option for this United team. However, there are some negatives that we have to consider as well. Ugarte is far from perfect. The first issue for me is the aerial situation. Now, in my opinion, Manchester United, generally speaking, are not good enough in the air. I go on about this quite a lot. Casemiro last season was one of our better players in these aerial situations, ranking in the 91st percentile in terms of aerial duel percentage. Now, if we look at Ugarte last season, the 44th percentile. That is a big drop off. That is a big skill set to lose in the middle of the pitch. That aerial capacity, just taking it out of the Manchester United midfield completely, would be concerning, particularly if you consider that Ugarte was doing that in the French League, where the aerial duels aren't quite as intense as what they are in the Premier League. That would be a concern. Another concern would also be Ugarte's aggressiveness in the duel. Now, we've already spoken about how that can be a positive for United, and it absolutely can. It can help us press more aggressively, win the second ball in the middle of the pitch. However, we all know that there are times in midfield where the better option is to delay, to slow things down a little bit, to cover the space behind you and really protect your centre-backs. This is where Ugarte struggles. Now, this is perhaps not even an Ugarte issue. Perhaps it's more of a tactical issue. Ten Hag seems to want this. Ten Hag seems to want that aggressive midfielder who wants to always go towards the ball. That's why we signed Casemiro, right? He's not a player who, in 50-50 duels in the past 2 years, has ever really stepped off and delayed. He's always been quite aggressive and gone towards the ball. And Ugarte is something very similar. Now, that would suggest, therefore, that is Ten Hag's plan. That is what he wants to do. So this is perhaps more of a Ten Hag concern, really. But in terms of how that actually works for Ugarte, there are some concerns there. I've seen this GIF going about on Twitter, so I thought I would kind of give my thoughts on it. Ugarte doesn't have that instinctive thought of protecting the space behind him because he is so keen to go towards the ball. Now, I do think it's been blown out of proportion a little bit, how aggressive he is. I think people are taking it a little bit too far. But a situation like this does certainly show the problem. So PSG have just lost the ball here, and we can see Ugarte, we've got him circled in the middle of the pitch. Now, his instinct has to be to protect that space in behind him. Here. That has to be his instinct. He has to be covering this space, trying to cut the passing lane into these strikers to protect his centre-backs. That has to be his first thought. But it's not. It's not. In fact, on this occasion, he never even checks. He never even looks behind him. His first thought is looking ahead. Can I, have this opportunity to go and counter-press to squeeze high? And the problem with that, the fact that he doesn't scan, he doesn't know where the player is behind him. And that makes his passing lane really easy for the opposition. And Ugarte, for all his, right intentions defensively, he wants to win the ball back for his side, but because his positioning is poor, his instincts are wrong, it makes it quite easy to progress the ball against him. And that would be a concern. And that aggressiveness kind of continues to be a problem. Because we saw it at times last season for United, and Ugarte has the same issue. So we can see the player trying to receive the ball in midfield here, against Uruguay, at the Copa America. Now, Ugarte is going to take the opportunity. He's seen a player receiving with his back to play. This is Ugarte's opportunity to be really aggressive, go strong into the tackle. The problem Ugarte has when he does this is that he runs very straight. He is like a bull. He sees his target and he just goes for it. He runs straight at it. This means, though, that if the opposition player just changes direction quickly, Ugarte is left very flat-footed. You can see, if you look at Ugarte's kind of weight distribution in this situation, if you think that this player is going towards the middle of the pitch, and if you look at Ugarte's legs, he's in the complete wrong body position to actually change and turn and go that way quickly. He's actually got to take a whole nother step before he can even turn, which leaves him in a situation like this. He's spun, and this would be a problem for United. If Ugarte was to be aggressive in these areas, that would be a concern. Now, one thing I should say is that I think United's defensive structure is a little bit different this season. I would have been more concerned with this last year, actually, because what we saw a lot of last year was United in their block would still be man-to-man. So players would go really aggressive in midfield, like we just saw Ugarte doing, and it would leave us really open in midfield because our players would be manipulated. The opposition basically would realise who's marking them, pull wide to drag them out of position, and it opens up this passing lane in the middle. And Ugarte in that system last year would have been a massive problem. This year it does look a little bit different. We do look a little bit more compact. When the ball is going into these midfielders who have dropped deeper, we seem more willing to let them have that. If that continues, we continue that approach, and Ugarte adopts that approach, it will be a little bit better, and Ugarte can solve some problems. But again, it is just a concern. And then finally, just my other concern is his consistency in duels. Ugarte is a player who, in our heads, we think of as a specialist at winning the ball back for his side. We've seen already the amount of tackles he attempts. The problem is, when you look at the number of tackles he wins, the percentages, they're just too low. They are too low. He is beaten too easily. And the question is why? It's all because of his upper body, or his lack of upper body at times in terms of how he uses it. The best midfielders, the best ball-winning midfielders in the world, you know, someone like Declan Rice, a Rodri, a Palinha, they all use their upper body really well. They use their arms to disrupt the opposition. So they're using their arms initially for balance, you know, to stay on their feet whilst approaching the ball. But if you can get your arm across the chest of an opposition with a stiff arm, it makes it incredibly difficult for them to keep their balance. And that can do a lot of the defensive work for you. If you can put a player off balance, it is much easier to take the ball off them. We can see here, Ugarte is far from mastering the art of doing that. So we've got a situation, the ball's coming across the edge of the box and we've got Ugarte marked now. And it's just as he goes into this situation here. Ugarte is using more of a grappling approach. He is trying to grab the player rather than get his arm across him. Now, at times that's going to work. It will be just enough pressure to put a player off. But if we are looking at consistency, you know, percentages of the duels that he's going to win in midfield, this is really concerning. That arm, that left arm, should be straight across the chest of the opposition. And when it's not, you do find yourself kind of clutching and grabbing at players. Now, a lot of the time, that is still going to stop the player getting past you. I should make that clear. But what it does also lead to a lot of is players getting past you and having to foul them. Having to make fouls in silly areas of the pitch where if he was just a bit more sensible with how he used his body, he never would have got into this situation. So those are my thoughts on Ugarte defensively. And I think what you may have gathered from my thoughts there is I have concerns, but there are also a lot of positives, which is why I find the point at the start of the video very confusing. So many people are set on he is the one or avoid at all costs. I don't get how you can be so strong on either side of that when there's very, very clearly so many positives, but also a lot of negatives. In terms of positives, it does look like the midfielder that Ten Hag wants. I do think this is Ten Hag's idea of his ideal ball-winning midfielder, and that's a positive. He is a more mobile version of Casemiro with the way that he engages in a lot of duels. He wants to win the ball, he's looking to put fires out across the pitch, and he can at times dominate the small spaces. That's clearly what he wants to do. But there are weaknesses. Aerially, he is worse than Casemiro, and that is a concern in this squad because it is already a weakness. He doesn't use his upper body well enough, and that over-aggressive nature in midfield could be a problem at times. So should we sign Ugarte? I still don't know. I personally would probably be steering away from him. For me, there is one or two red flags too many. You know, just a couple of red flags which are putting me off the deal. However, I am not saying this is going to flop. Ugarte could sign for this club, and with the right bit of coaching, we've got to remember this is a very young player. With a good bit of coaching, and just a couple of pointers in the right direction in a few areas, you know, how he's using his upper body, when to be aggressive, when to step off. If he works in those areas, this could really work. United could get themselves a player who could be one of the best ball-winning midfielders on the planet. In terms of the aerial situation, he's unlikely to improve massively there, perhaps a little bit, but that can be addressed with signings around him, bringing different players into the club. So that's not as big a problem as what people are making out, in my opinion. The concern is more the aggressive nature, and the way that he uses his body isn't good enough. Will it change? I don't know. If it does, we've got ourselves a quality ball-winning midfielder who is also pretty good on the ball. I can do a video on that if you like. If he doesn't develop in those areas, we've got ourselves a player who is going to try and make a lot of tackles, win a lot of them, but also lose a lot of them, which will leave us open. So it's a real 50-50. For me, this really hinges on how he adapts to the league and how he develops as a player. So it's a risk, but risks happen in football. Risks are taken in football, and sometimes they really work, and that could be the case with Ugarte should Manchester United sign him. So those are my thoughts out of possession. I'm very uncertain, but now I want to hear your thoughts. Get in the comments down below. Is this a player that we should go for? Is he the right player for our midfield? Tactically, is it the right sort of profile? And the weaknesses, do you agree that those are problems or not? Let me know what you think. But apart from that, we are finished for today. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you have enjoyed it. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.